good, we're good to go. We'll get us up here running. 3, 2, 1. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Tuesday night Bible study class. We are going to, as we're on Facebook Live, I'm going to go through and start inviting people. In the meantime, we had a great dinner tonight. We had fried chicken, mashed potatoes and gravy, green beans. You guys don't know what you missed. So, what?
She's got dessert for everybody. Hey,
Well,
that's two apiece.
I appreciate it, but I can't. I would love to. So tonight we're going to talk about Psalm 64. Kind of a cool psalm. Now, for those of you that don't know, the week before I do class, I do a blog on Google Blog, and I do a commentary on whatever we're going to do Tuesday night in class. That way, I can refer to it when I've had time to sit and study it and read from it. So tonight, if you see me looking over at the computer and reading, that's what I'm going to be reading. So, okay, I'm just about ready. Invitations are out. Blog is set. We're good to go. Okay. So tonight we are coming to you, as we have been lately, from Harvard Park Baptist Church and Community Center. Nice little church. The community center is awesome. It's a large two-story building. They do all kinds of stuff in here. One of the things that they have been doing is they have been videotaping the sermons on Sunday and sending them out. You can go to their website. I think it's Harvard Park Baptist Church on Facebook. And anyway, you can see it on there. I'm sure they would ask, just like I would ask, if you like it, please share it so that your friends can do it, because the more people that share it, the more people that will get to hear God's Word. And I've watched it the last couple of weeks. The pastor is good. The sermons are good. They are Bible-based, so you don't have to worry about that. And especially if you can't get out or don't want to get out and go to church, it's a great way to do that. Same with our Facebook page. If you like the way we do our Bible study class, please hit share, and so more people can watch it. All right. So here we go. Psalm 64. This psalm differs from the others we have looked at in several ways. First, God is not going to deliver the psalmist from his troubles, but allow him to go through it. And secondly, the enemy here seems to be using words to destroy and not swords. Through the first 6 verses, we see 7 different references to words used. From verses 7 through 10, we see none. What we do see is God's reaction to those that have hurt the psalmist. This psalm can be divided into 2 parts: how the godless pursue and how the Lord takes care of his own. And I've told the story many times, but I can promise you that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he still does this today. The caveat to that, though, is you have to turn it completely over to God, no matter what the circumstance, because as long as you've got one finger to try to take care of your situation or your problem, God's going to let you deal with it. But the second you turn it completely over to God and let him deal with it, he will take over, and he still does that today. Okay. Psalm 64, oppressed by the wicked, but rejoicing on the Lord. And that introduction right there exactly sums up how the psalm is divided into 2 parts. So to the chief musician, a psalm of David. Verse 1, hear my voice, O God, in my meditation. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity. So David is not in any danger that we can see. This is, he's scared of his enemy. And the interesting thing here is wherever he's at, whatever he's doing, he's meditating. Now we saw in the last verse where even as king, David did not end the night when he went to bed by thinking about things that had happened during the day. He meditated on God, which meant he was praying. And I've always thought that that was an outstanding way to prove that your life is not all about you. Because if you go to bed thinking about you, that's what's most important. He says, preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Let me ask you a question. Who's the enemy?
Satan.
It is. And then verse 2 starts, it says, hide me from the secret plots of the wicked. Remember in the New Testament somewhere Paul says, we are not unaware of the ways of Satan. They trick and tempt and all of that. So the secret plots of the wicked. Now that could also mean that his physical enemies are plotting and they're asking God to protect him from them. From the rebellion of the workers of iniquity. Who's the workers of iniquity?
Satan's minions.
That's exactly right. Who sharpen their tongue like a sword. Now see, here's a good example where he's not talking about a physical sword. Sharpen their tongue like a sword, which means they're going to try to hurt you verbally. And this is very easy for us to see even in today. I mean, if you go to work and people are talking about you behind your back, or they're plotting ways to get rid of you or get back at you, this psalm fits perfectly. From the rebellion of the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows. And then it's got a hyphen that says bitter words. So their arrows that they're shooting are bitter words. It's interesting in the New Testament, Jesus says that from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So that is one of the indicators that you can find when people are, oh, hi Bill. Good to see you.
Sorry I'm late.
No, you're fine. We got a nice dinner over there for you.
There's fried chicken over there, fried
It
chicken.
sounds good.
Yep. Where's your
How
friend?
are you? Pardon?
Where's your friend?
Oh, I believe she's got a sore throat or
Oh, no.
cough, something like that.
Yep.
She said to tell you she didn't want to give it to the others.
Right.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to disturb. I'm just going to the restroom.
No problem. We're glad you're here.
I am too.
So, when we look at politics in the office, I mean, this describes it perfectly. And so when Jesus said, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, that's a really good indicator that you can tell if somebody is a Christian or not. It doesn't mean they don't cuss. It doesn't mean they don't have a sharp tongue. But I can tell you this, I work around people that are not saved, and you can spot that a minute in the New York Minute. And he describes it here perfectly. They sharpen their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, that they may shoot in secret at the blameless. Isn't that perfect? That's exactly what happens. Suddenly they shoot at him and do not fear. Now that last phrase, and do not fear, is where, and notice he qualified it by saying blameless. If they are blameless, that means that they have turned over all of that nastiness, and God has got them. They're not guilty. Blameless means not guilty. God's going to take care of this. So what David is saying here is, hey, they're blameless, they've done nothing wrong, and these guys are coming after them like a pack of wolves. This psalm can be very relevant to us in the everyday workplace because verbal violence is on display here. Through the first 6 verses, we see phrases like sharpen their tongues, bitter words, talk of laying snares, and they devise iniquities. In verse 2, hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity. Here the psalmist is acknowledging that even though his enemies are not using swords, their words are bad enough that he's asking God to protect him. Notice also another of those violently verbal phrases. Secret plots. Plots are made by speech. Verse 3 continues, who sharpen their tongue like a sword and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, bitter words. Here we see that the psalmist comes right out and tells us that words are the weapon of choice. The word picture of sharpening their tongues like a sword drives home how lethal verbal violence can be. I think it's really important to make a differentiation here. You know, violence can be perpetrated by the tongue, but that does not, in my opinion, equal PC police, politically correct, verbal police.
Yeah.
When we grow up, at least when I grew up, you either learn to protect yourself or you were the butt of all the jokes. Mm-hmm. That art has been lost. It never ceases to amaze me when I see grown men crying like little girls and dressed up in girl clothes. That amazes me. You know, you got your feelings hurt, suck it up, buttercup, and deal with it. You know, don't go crying and call the police and file a report. And when you belong to God, your defense is God, and He will take care of those people.
Yeah.
But God may decide to work through you. You know, if you are a female and you live in a big city, it would not be surprising to me for many Christians to be carrying a gun or learn self-defense. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's how God. There's
Yeah.
paper towels there. I brought some in. That does not mean they are less Christian. That means God has provided them an opportunity
There you go, Bill.
to take care of themselves. And so when we are trained as kids, that was part of God's training for us to take care of ourselves. So I think it's really important that we see that difference. Verse 5, they encourage themselves in an evil matter. They talk of laying snares secretly. They say, who will see them? They devise iniquities. So here they're saying just over and over and over, they're saying the same thing. The enemies, whoever they may be, are doing all of these nasty verbal things. They're laying snares in secret. They're sharpening their tongues. They're giving bitter words. They're laying secret plots. So the blameless here is looking at a trap being set up by nothing but words. Then verse 6 says, they devise iniquities, and then in quotation marks, we have perfected a shrewd scheme. Both the inward thought and the heart of men are deep. So now we're overhearing what the bad people are saying to each other. We can lay a snare. Who's going to see it? And our inward thoughts. What does Jesus say about the heart of man? It is evil above all things. The heart of man is evil above all things. So, which by the way should lay to rest that age-old story that men have always had, and the two sides of it is man is basically a good person who has to live in bad circumstances, and the other is no, man pretty much sucks no matter what happens in life. According to the Bible, the heart is evil above all things. So when it says here in Psalms, it says both the inward thought and the heart of man, they're equating those two. Inward thought and the heart of man are deep. So if the inward heart is deep, and so is the inward thought, and they're evil, that means evil is deep in man. And I want to, this is a good time, I'm going to draw this parallel. I got into a big discussion one time in class, and I was talking about the fruit of the Spirit and doing good deeds. And somebody mentioned Muslims to me. And said, well, I know a Muslim man, he's a really nice guy. And I said, no, he's not. And then I looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, no man is good. There's no man is good. I said, what you're judging is what he does. I said, let me explain to you about the Muslim religion and every other religion on earth except Judaism and Christianity. Their definition of getting into heaven is you put your good deeds on one side of a scale, you put your bad deeds on the other side, and whichever side is the heaviest, that's where your soul spends eternity. So the Muslims are very good at doing good deeds. They're also good at killing Christians. Okay? Good deeds, and remember, Paul and John had the same discussion in the New Testament. Heaven is not determined by the number of good deeds. Let me ask you this. If you spent your whole life like Mother Teresa, and you did nothing but good deeds, just so you could get into heaven, doesn't that make you God? Because you're deciding that you're going to heaven. You're in charge of going to heaven. If you do all good deeds, huh?
That is not right.
That's what what that religion says.
Which one?
The Muslims or any other religion except Christianity and Judaism, huh?
Catholic.
Catholic.
Okay.
They're doing the scale thing. But if you have any say at all in going to heaven, that makes you God.
Yeah.
That would be like me telling you, you have to drive across town to get to my house. If you want to come into my house, you have to drive a car across town. And you just say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to take an Uber. In your mind, the destination is what matters. That's not what I said. So when you get to my house, I'm going to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not what I told you. And Jesus said the same thing. If you want to get to heaven, you have to acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, believe in your heart and confess with your mouth. And if you don't do that, you can do all the good deeds in the world. That's not what Jesus said. So, whenever we talk about the deeds, you need to remember that the deeds is not what gets you to heaven. The deeds, once you get saved, have been set up by God for you to do to exhibit your faith
Yes.
to non-believers.
Through
But it is not a
obedience.
prerequisite to getting to heaven.
Right.
And I always like to draw that distinction, and sometimes it's hard for people to be like that. And when I had that conversation with that girl, I think that was the last time she ever came to class. Because she could not accept the fact, first, that men were evil. And secondly, that every other religion weighed their sins on scales. They do. I was raised Catholic.
You were?
I was.
Okay.
I know all about Catholicism.
Yeah.
I spent time in the Far East. I know a lot about Buddhism and Taoism. I've studied the Muslims. All their religions have several things in common. One of them is their leaders are all dead. The second thing is getting into heaven is works-based. That's not what Jesus said. So then he says, so the heart of men are deep. Verse 7 says, okay, now remember there was two parts to this. And the first part was how the wicked are pursuing the blameless. And the second part is, and remember, the whole part of this is the blameless. Now God is going to step in and take care of his people here. All right? And we're going to get ready to start verse 7 here. Verses 7 through 9 shows how God can respond to the enemies of those that are his. Verse 8 says, so he will make them stumble over their own tongue. All who see them shall flee away. So we see that after his enemy sharpened his tongue, God made him trip over it. Not only does that take care of the psalmist's current problem, it also says that those who saw it fled. So in one move, God takes care of David's current and future problems with his enemies coming after him with verbal violence. And I want to give you, this is a true story, by the way, and I want to tell you exactly this living out in true life. And I have told this story before, so if you heard it before, I apologize. But it's a perfect demonstration of what happens. And I want to reread this so I can tie this together. God takes care of David's current and future problems with his enemies coming after him with verbal violence. Okay? So I'm sitting in the office, and nobody else in our office is saved. Okay? And it's mostly all guys. And we're sitting around and we're talking, and the guys are talking about football. And the two guys were talking about who's going to win Sunday's game, and one guy picked one team and one guy picked the other team. And the one guy, who's not Christian at all, says, oh, I would never vote against Tim Tebow. Now, if you don't know, Tim Tebow is a Christian football player, very outspoken Christian football player. And the other guy says, he's a lousy quarterback. The other guy's going to chew him up. And the guy says, you're probably right. He says, but I've watched Tim Tebow come up through the college ranks. You don't ever bet against him because God takes care of that man. No matter what happens, no matter what the situation, Tim Tebow always comes out just fine. And I thought about that, and I thought, so this guy is a non-Christian. And God, by taking care of Tim Tebow, has shown this guy in my office that, hey, God takes care of his people.
That's the non-Christian.
That's the non-Christian.
Yeah.
This same guy that said that came after me one time, verbally, trying to get me fired. And just by God's circumstance, yeah, you want to? That same red button, flip it off and then flip it back on. Just by God's circumstance,